Good morning, all. My name is Andy,
And I'm Mark.
and this is Strange Stuff Podcast. It's episode, I don't know, 180 something.
We must be getting close to 200, surely.
Yeah, we are. And if you're lucky enough to be actually looking at us on YouTube, you can see that we're wearing matching tops today. Isn't that sweet?
Well, not quite. Mine's a quality merino
Of course,
wool.
you fucking posh twat.
Now, I've got two things to mention.
Yes.
Firstly, I spoke to one of our most ardent
How is Phil?
He was saying he's listened to every single episode since we started, which is quite a feat.
He must, I mean, I know he's married, but does he not have a sex life?
Maybe he listens to our podcast while having sex. You never know.
I can see how that would intensify his experience.
Yeah. Well, you know, he thought I was a bit of a hero, and obviously he thinks you're a bit of an idiot. But apart from that...
Yeah, that's not what he said at all.
Well, I did actually recommend to Phil the episode that's going to be released today about the pyramids.
Oh, yeah.
But that was before I did a little bit of research.
Oh, no, you're not allowed to do that. That was last week's episode.
Even after the event, should definitely avoid doing... I should have guessed it was all utter bollocks when you started talking about cosmic Mayon ray technology.
It's not all utter bollocks.
So what you were talking about was utter bollocks. There was actually a study that was carried out about one aspect of some void chamber, but nothing to do with 648 meter deep pylons going down into the desert.
You see, you're accepting the narrative that they're trying to feed you.
Oh, God.
You've got to get more conspiratorial.
You sound like Trump and Elon Musk now. It's getting pretty worrying. Every week confirms the direction they... Did you see that video of that poor woman being arrested by masked individuals on the street?
No.
She was a PhD academic at... Which university was it? I can't remember which university it was. But literally 3 men in masks, faces covered, approached her, arrested her, handcuffed her. And she would say, well, who are you? What are you doing? And it was immigration officials. I mean, she was a PhD student, but completely legal. All the paperwork in place, arrested on the street.
How are they allowed to wear masks and not identify themselves?
That is the most worrying thing. How can you be allowed to wear masks as an official supposedly carrying out official duty? No, I agree. But anyway, at least Vance and what's the wife's name? Flusher? Crusher?
Fucking no
Nasher.
idea.
They got a warm welcome in Greenland, didn't they?
I saw that, yeah.
In fact,
the fucking audacity of going there.
I know. They couldn't
like some kind of fucking saviour.
I know.
I'm here.
There are 58,000 people living in Greenland, and not one of them was willing, even the lunatic on the grass, wasn't willing to meet up with Vance and his missus. So they had to make do with some American Air Force base 800 miles up the road or something. And the only photograph that was published of them standing in front of an iceberg or something stupid.
The best thing about that air base is it's a base for Space Force.
Oh, is that what it was? Space Force. What the hell?
Space Force. I mean, come on. Didn't they get an inkling as to the direction that country was going in when they started organising a Space Force?
Oh,
For
dear.
fuck's sake. Get into space first, you loser.
I wonder how many of those 58,000 Greenlanders have ever thought of a a military threat from China. What the? I mean, China is literally
Greenland is actually
miles
closer.
away.
Greenland is closer to the UK than it is to North America.
It's just absurd. I mean, literally, I'm looking at it. China is over there. Greenland is over there. And yet Trump's reason for Greenlanders have to understand the threat from China.
Yeah, and it's also strategically really important for both national and international security.
My
fucking
arse.
wanker. Someone needs to shoot him toot fucking sweet.
You shouldn't say that, Andy. Now, in fact, oh God, I don't have my telephone in front of me.
If I don't say it, who will?
I saw a YouTube video the other day explaining how to turn off the, the listening aspect. Because I always, when we've talked before, I thought it was a conspiracy theory that Google listened to you, but it's just a feature on your phone. They do listen to you. They listen to every word you say.
Yeah, of course.
And that helps in the search. When
and
you go
it also
searching.
Helps them to train their AI.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to try and work out how to turn it off, but needless to say, I couldn't remember how to do it.
It's not that simple. You're not supposed to turn it off.
No, clearly. No. There are a number of hoops that you have to jump through to be able to turn it off. But
you probably
anyway,
need signatures of both your grandparents, both sets of grandparents.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, what else has happened? Of course, this terrible earthquake in. I had to think. God,
Myanmar. Yeah,
exactly. That is the
Thailand.
old. No, it's not Thailand.
It's close.
It's next to Thailand, but isn't it the old Burma? Isn't Burma?
Could be that they've, for some politically correct reason, changed the name of Burma.
So, yeah, Burma's not in existence anymore. I've got to look it up, actually, before. I don't want to mislead the listeners. I want to be at least some bastion of reliable information.
What do you mean? I give a no shit guarantee with my facts and figures.
So, Burma, how do you spell Burma?
Burma.
Burma. Yeah, it is. Myanmar.
Thank you for checking my spelling.
Yeah. Maybe I should leave that open. Oh dear! But that was pretty.
I saw a video.
Swimming pools.
Yeah, I saw a video of a swimming pool leaving the roof of a hotel with people in it.
What?
They were lucky to be able to get out before the water left this building.
Oh my God!
There were people in the pool, and it started rocking, and the water started splashing over the edge, and they all scrambled for the edge and climbed out, and hanging onto deck chairs and things.
As the water just started going sloshing over the side.
Can you imagine that? What a way to go!
Being washed over the top of a skyscraper. What are the chances of that happening?
I mean, if you had a bet on at Ladbrokes,
you would have made a fortune. And then that 30-story under construction building that just collapsed.
Which is probably a good job. Because if it had been completed and moved into and then they had the earthquake...
No, but one assumes it wouldn't have... it didn't have the counterbalance weights in place. Well, surely that's
foundation work. You don't throw up a building and then earthquake-proof it.
No, but don't they have great big balls at the top of these buildings that sway to counteract the thing of the earthquake?
My great big balls are almost on the floor now.
Yeah, they could use your dangly old balls. Anyway, I mean, we're laughing, but obviously that was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
If you were there. And what else has gone on? Oh, I can't actually think. I've been chopping wood for the whole week. It's absolutely backbreaking. And I've got a machine. I borrowed a machine.
They're pretty cheap, aren't they? Those machines. No. You can get them from Yisk, I think, for like $20.
No, you can buy them from Euler for a couple of thousand, but this is sort of like a forestman's machine.
No,
I borrowed it. I haven't bought it.
You went Versace rather than George from Asda.
60,000 Swedish, about 5,000 sterling. But
what, you paid $5,000 for it?
I told you I borrowed it. It didn't cost me anything.
Oh,
But
oh
the
of course,
thing
that's
is,
why you're wealthy. You don't spend your money; you spend other people's.
you can't say anything. If I'd said I'd bought it, oh yeah, rich bastard.
Yes,
Uh,
I'm far too wealthy to spend my own cash. I'll just borrow from the peasantry.
I mean, it is an interesting point actually, because that is a trait of the wealthy.
I know,
that
they don't
like
spend
Boris
any money.
Johnson gets other people to pay for decorating of
Yeah.
his flats and things. What is that all about? Why doesn't he pay for it himself?
Because otherwise he would not get wealthy.
Well,
That's
I
the
wonder how he
accumulation of
is.
wealth.
I
School
wonder how
lesson one.
Boris, and what was her name? Claire?
No, gauzy-eyed monkey face bitch. I can't remember. She was a weird-looking one.
I wonder how they're getting on. I hope they're happily married.
He is.
Why do you say that? No, I don't think he is at all.
Of course he is, because he's still putting it about all over the place, having children left, right, and centre, and she's putting up with it. So what's he got to complain about?
Yeah.
That is one leopard that will never change its spots.
No, Boris. Oh well, that was. Yeah, I don't want to go back to Trump all the time, but that was when he did his press conference the day after, not the morning of, but the day after the scandal of this ludicrous war plan thing on Twitter. Not quite. And he was saying, what? Oh, no, I don't know anything about that. What? Oh, Twitter, no, you don't want to listen to that. And pretending he didn't know anything about it. It must be the biggest story in America. Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I'll have to check. Had we talked? When had that happened? Had that happened already last week? It was this week that happened, wasn't it?
I don't know, because I'm actually not familiar with it. Are you talking about the ultimatums that he's been delivering to the Ayatollah?
No. When they... oh God, I don't want to repeat because then it will be obvious of my dementia. But no, the raid on the Houthis by F-16 aircraft.
Oh right,
that happened. I think it was last week.
I don't think we talked about it.
Oh well, that's an amazing story. So Hesketh, or whoever the defence minister is, there's a group. Like a WhatsApp group, but it's on something called Signal.
Yes, and they
and he was saying,
basically demeaned the whole of Europe.
No, not that. No, well, that as well, but no, this was literally they are texting 11:09 F-16s departing from airbase. Bombs will be dropping in 17 minutes. Confirmed hit, and all of this is on a group chat
with a journalist
that had been mistakenly added to the list. And even Fox News
not mistakenly. I 100% promise you that was not a mistake.
Well, it might have been a mistake adding him to that particular group.
No, I think somebody did that on purpose. Because
well, no, but we know who did it.
Even someone on the inner circle is thinking, this is fucking mental.
Well, it's interesting you say that. It was a fellow called Waltz, I think his name was, because...
Hang on, was it his last waltz?
It could have been. It probably was. The Fox News journalist said, well, what was this fellow doing on your net contacts list?
He's our coffee runner. We need to get him on coffee runs.
Because they were all saying he's a Trump hater, he's a traitor, he's a loser journalist. And the Fox reporter said, well, why was he on your contact list in the first place? So everybody suspects that this fellow Waltz was in fact a source for this Atlantic reporter, because he's a well-established journalist. So sort of doubling up on the fuck-up of these people, and yet they just, oh no, there's nothing to see here. No, it wasn't confidential information. I mean, if that's not confidential, when the jets are leaving the airbase and when they're going to drop their bombs.
Who is it they're bombing? The Houthis.
The Houthis.
And under what pretense have they got an arm in or a leg in this war?
Well, it's not a war, it's a preemptive, isn't it? Because they
So
might
it's
be a
okay
threat
to go bombing people as long as it's not a
preemptively.
war.
No, absolutely.
Fucking
Yeah.
warmongering motherfuckers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, we should stop bashing Trump so much, because you can imagine that
I would imagine that
half.
90% of our listeners voted for him.
Well, no, statistically, half of our American listeners voted for him.
And, that's fine. You're allowed to vote who you want for, or for who you want. I mean, look,
But
the
you
UK,
have to.
the UK voted for Keir Starmer, and look what's going on there.
Yeah, it's not.
Fuck me.
Well, you're
is
right.
as bad. It is as bad.
Well, not quite, but
It is because he's actually attacking his own people.
No, you're right. Yeah, no, you're right. Traditional Labour supporters are being screwed up the arse, unfortunately.
And old age pensioners. Don't be one of those.
Yeah, don't be a pensioner. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, what else? There is something else going on in the world. We've done the earthquake. We've done the signal scandal. We've mentioned Keir Starmer, just to keep it balanced.
Not really balanced, because we only spent a fleeting second on old Sir Keir, head of the Labour Party.
Well, that is Nick Ferrari's tactics on LBC. So he's a staunch, obviously right-wing, but he always claims to present a balanced show, but that's exactly what he does. He talks about Boris for 3/4 of an hour and then talks about Keir Starmer for 30 seconds.
Yeah, but he was always a Boris arse kisser.
He was. And I probably have mentioned this before, but the absolute low point in his journalistic career was, what do you remember when that Partygate scandal was going on?
Yes.
And there was just no escape from it. I mean, it was just, he was caught to rights, caught to book, whatever it was,
Banged
this
to
Boris
rights.
Johnson, banged to rights, caught red-handed.
Fingers in the pussy.
So what Nick Ferrari resorted to doing was talking about the highway code for 2 days. Literally the highway code, cyclists have to use that lane and motorists can use. He literally talked about it for 2 days.
Yeah, he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of his buddy.
That was quite incredible. And I don't want to be unkind, but I know you don't listen to it anymore.
Not for years.
Not for years?
Not since
really?
I've been up here.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No.
Oh, anyway. Alrighty, so that's that. We're going to have 15 degrees next week.
We're actually warmer than you at the moment, I think.
I don't know what we've got today, like 6 degrees at the moment.
Oh, is that all?
I've got a weather here, 5 degrees. Partly sunny.
I can't even see my degreeage.
Really? On your fully powered up computer?
Yeah, I try not to have too much stuff. I can tell you, though, I'll just go and ask Alexa.
What?
Alexa, what's the temperature? Okay, we're having 8 degrees today.
All right, so it's basically the same as here. When you get up off your chair and you show me the back of your chair...
Oh, no, it's horrible.
God, dear.
It's time for a new chair, but, as an unemployed person, that's not going to happen for a while.
You could throw a blanket over it or something.
No. Why? I can't even see it while I'm sitting in it.
Well, you can, because you can see your image in the camera.
Yeah, but it's still, you can see that it's well loved. The cats have enjoyed every second of it. And
what's
every millimetre.
Quite amazing is that obviously the damage that's been done to your chair has been done while you're sitting in it.
Mostly, yeah.
Because where your shoulders and head are, there's no damage. And around your shoulders and head...
Yeah, have you never seen
destroyed?
Ronnie pounces on and goes climbing over the top of my head quite a lot.
Have you never thought of training your cats?
Have you ever tried to train a cat?
Well, no, but I wouldn't have a cat if it wasn't trainable.
You can't.
Of course you can train cats.
No, you can't. And they're not supposed to be trained. I won't have it.
You can train a cat to use the toilet.
Yes, well done, and then get it to flush as well.
I think you can. I think I've seen it on YouTube where cats actually sitting on the seat having a wee
Yeah,
or a
and
poo.
how would you feel about being filmed going for a fucking pee and then putting up on YouTube?
What do you mean?
That's
Some
abuse.
people like
That's
some people
abuse.
like that sort of thing.
Yeah, but you don't save that for your OnlyFans. Don't put it on YouTube.
Do you think there is an OnlyFans channel called Toilet Adventures? Or
I would
something?
not be in the least bit surprised. How to go potty with no potty in sight.
Oh dear! I'll tell you what I started. It's not about abuse. It's there's a Netflix series that's got a lot of publicity, which is why I started watching
Adolescence.
it. Yeah, have you seen it?
Awful. Couldn't watch it. I tried. I got halfway through the second episode and I turned it off. It is the worst filmed piece of shit I've seen in a long time.
Well, I was quite drawn into the first episode. Maybe it deteriorates in the second. I don't know.
Have you not seen the second episode?
No, I haven't. So don't spoil it.
Get ready for the most
just
boring hour of your fucking life. The first one was pretty boring. And I thought it might heat up a bit in the second episode. Oh, God, no. It's fucking
how could it
dire.
have had such rave reviews? It's had rave reviews.
I'm sorry, it's bollocks. Overhyped, over-directed, over-fucking produced. It's awful.
Well, just those words that you've uttered, over-directed and overproduced,
they've gone out of their way. It's
impossible because, do you know why? Do you know why it's impossible to have been over-directed and overproduced?
Go on, why?
Because it was all done in one take.
Well, it looks like
literally.
It, to be honest. It looks like it.
Oh, so now it's under-directed.
No, but that's what I mean. You can I hate the way it was filmed. The whole thing was fucking horrible to look at.
It was one camera and one take.
It was horrible to watch.
Oh, I didn't think so. I thought it was pretty engrossing. I've only seen one episode.
I thought they did it on purpose. I thought this is some kind of new way of presenting a sort of dramamentary. It was fucking awful.
In fact, who is the father character? He used to be
no idea. Hang on. Yeah,
he's a well-known actor.
Yeah, he's played a lot of villains
EastEnders.
in Snatch and that sort of thing. He's been in all the Guy Ritchie films.
That's right, yeah. So he's a well-respected actor, and he is a good actor. I think it was something to do with him that they decided to do it all in one take. And I was thinking, what happens if the actors screw up their lines or something?
Come on, that's their job. Just do your job. Stop being overpaid and having 28 times to get it right. I don't understand why most things aren't done in one take. If I was being paid that much money, I wouldn't fuck it up. I'd get it done and go home early. That's the way you do it.
No one would entrust you to do anything in one take. Your life has been a series.
Every episode we've done has been
560.
done. Every episode we've done has been done in one take, and they are all perfect.
That was something I was talking to Phil about. Do you actually do much editing these days?
Not as much as I used to.
Do you even listen to the episodes?
I don't listen to them when they're finished, no.
So you don't do editing?
I do editing.
Oh, you do?
But not very much. I like to keep it real, and I like to do one take.
No, because I think that was when Phil was calling you a complete twat, that there were a lot of big gaps in the speech that he's thinking, has it finished? Oh, no, here we go.
We don't even have big gaps when we talk. It might, because what I used to do when we were audio only, I used to reduce all the pauses. But I don't do that anymore because it takes like 2.5 hours to edit one episode. And remember, I'm doing 2 episodes a week now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I just don't have that time. And I figured once we did video, you can see where you edit out pauses because the video chops.
Oh, of course. Yes, that's right.
So I try not to.
Well, it's lucky we're so well practiced at doing these things after 187 episodes.
Is it 187?
I just guessed that.
It's close.
Can't you see on Spotify?
I normally check when I do my post in the mornings, but I just didn't do it this morning. Anyway, listen,
So,
we've got to get on to today's topic.
I was going to say, please tell me it doesn't contain anything to do with cosmic myon radiography.
Damn. You bingoed it again.
I got it right last time, didn't I, actually, guessing what the subject was?
You did. No, today we're going to talk about a bit of abuse.
Hang on a second. Before you start, that would be a nice little game for our listeners. We could do 20 questions. I have to guess what the subject matter is.
That wouldn't be a nice game for our listeners. That'd be a nice game for you because it'd keep you happy. Should I get you some crayons as well? And you can practice staying inside the lines.
What do you mean?
What are you talking about? How is that a good thing for our listeners?
Well, because they can try and guess what the subject matter is before me.
They're probably trying to guess how long it's going to be before you're sacked from your non-paying job.
The first question would always be, Andy, is this all bollocks?
Now, there is a clue.
That doesn't help at all because everything you've ever done is all bollocks.
There is a clue in your title and my title as to this week's episode.
Expert and victim. A miscarriage of justice.
No. We're going to talk today about transorbital lobotomies. And because you are the doctor lover and the expert lover.
I was so close with the cosmic myon radiography.
You are
what a lobotomy is.
I know exactly what it is. And because you are the doctor and expert lover, I've assigned you to the opposition.
The expert. Tell me again, what is the subject?
Well, technically we're going to talk about transorbital lobotomies or lobotomies in general, but we're going to start by talking about...
what's transorbital? You mean going around the Earth or your head? Transorbital.
We'll come to that, Mark. We'll come to that. But I want to talk, first of all, about the impact that one of these lobotomies had on someone related to a very famous family.
Hopefully positive. You're going to say he miraculously was able to speak 20 languages after this.
Well, we're talking about she, and it was the sister of JFK, Rosemary Kennedy.
JFK is the one that actually got shot.
Yes. She was born into one of the 20th century's most prominent families, political families in America. And she was quite celebrated as a society beauty and even presented to court at Buckingham Palace to Elizabeth I, the Queen Mother.
No.
But she disappeared from society at the age of 23 following, it says, a tragic decision, but I would call it a calculated, fucking abusive decision taken by her father, Joe.
Hang on. Sorry. JFK's sister.
Yes.
So if we assume she was roughly the same age as JFK, he was 60 when he was shot in the 60s. That would make her 120. How long was the Queen in... Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right.
The dates will add up. I'm not making any of this up for a change.
Apart from the fact that you thought this was a calculated, malicious act on the part of the medical establishment?
The father.
Oh, the father. Oh,
Joe.
dear.
Now, she was born, as I say, into one of America's most prominent political families. Father Joseph was an Irish-American millionaire and politician who was born into a New England political family, and he made his fortune in films, whiskey and steel.
Did he?
Yes.
But hang on a second. Oh, I see. So he, Joe, married into a political family, but his name was Kennedy. That's what established the political connections. All right. Yeah, carry on.
Him and his wife, Rose Elizabeth, who was an intensely devout princess of Boston's Catholic aristocracy, married in 1914, and they had 9 fucking kids.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Irish American.
Just before the First World War. It was lucky they did.
I don't know if you're aware.
Did you know that there's a critical lack of children in Sweden?
A critical amount of lack of Swedish children, perhaps?
No, children. No one's being born anymore. It's dropped off a cliff. The birth rate has dropped off.
Everyone I know at work who is female is breeding like rabbits.
Are they? Oh, good on them. Well done.
Now they've got no jobs.
Not so good.
Are you aware of the Kennedy curse?
Well, I know.
It's a real thing.
How many of them have died?
Exactly.
Yeah, it has to be something.
I mean,
no one can be that unlucky.
There's a fairly tragic sequence of events that befell the Kennedys.
We've covered this.
This is background to the story that is very relevant.
No, but I'm just saying we have talked about this before, haven't we?
We haven't actually talked about JFK.
All right. Yes, we have.
We didn't do an episode on the assassination, I'm pretty certain.
All right, yep.
I could be wrong, because I'm almost as senile as you are. The couple's eldest son, Joe Jr., of course, had been groomed since childhood by his father for a future presidency of the United States. He was killed in action in 1944 while serving as a pilot in the Second World War. Now, if you're being groomed to be the president in the Second World War, don't go up in a Spitfire, where your average life expectancy is 15 minutes.
I would contest that. I think being in the Air Force was one of the safest places to be.
Nope. Pilots in the Second World War had a life expectancy of about a week and a half.
Really?
Yes, they were shot down en masse regularly. Their fourth child, Kathleen, was also killed in a plane crash while flying with her lover from Britain to the south of France in 1948.
And one of their grandchildren died in a plane crash, didn't they?
We're not finished. The second Kennedy son, John F., would take over Joe Jr.'s political mantle, and he was elected as the 35th president of the US. And as we know, he was assassinated in Dallas in November 1963. In 1968, the couple's seventh child, Bobby Kennedy, was shot during his own campaign to become president.
Shot dead?
Yes. Just a year later, in 1969, their youngest son, Ted Kennedy, was involved in a car accident on the New England island of Chappaquiddick. You'll probably remember this, which resulted in the death of his young lady passenger, Mary Jo Kopechne, and led to a bit of a scandal about how she managed to drown and he survived, and the circumstances surrounding that particular car trip, which we might get into in another episode. And although many of these incidents have been written about and analysed countless times, there are very few people who might know about the fate of Rosemary Kennedy, the third child and eldest daughter of the Kennedys.
So they had 9 to start with.
Yes.
4 of them went
at least 4.
Tragic ends.
Yeah.
And this is the 5th who might end up in a not healthy state.
Well, she was born on Friday the 13th. I don't know if you've put any stock in that. In September of 1918. The start of the First World War.
Right.
Or the end. Yeah, it was 14 to 18, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But at the time of her birth, the city of Brookline in Massachusetts was in the grip of the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, which would kill anywhere, and nobody's sure, between 20 and 50 million people worldwide.
That's right. I remember that.
Because I guess, like the scamdemic, everyone who died of anything was put down to the Spanish flu. It's much easier that way.
You are still hung up on that.
Well, at the end of this episode, you might actually lean towards not just trusting someone because they're an expert. So, because of the Spanish flu, the doctor attending the birth was delayed with other patients. And during Rose Kennedy's labour, although the baby's head was already emerging, the midwife told Rose to keep her legs clamped together to prevent the birth until the doctor arrived.
I think even in 1918 they should have known better.
Well, according to an account,
poor little thing was starved of oxygen.
According to an account by Luella Hennessy Donovan, who was the family's nursemaid and governess, Rose followed these instructions for 2 hours.
2 hours?
Yes. As Rosemary grew, it became apparent that she had both behavioural and educational difficulties, and specialists later told the Kennedys that her development was due to, or her lack of development, was due to oxygen deprivation suffered as a result of what was termed a uterine accident. It's not an accident. Her disabilities were often hidden or disguised by her family to avoid the stigma of being associated with defective genes. Now, the father, Joe, in this whole story, comes across as a complete twat. And that's not the 4-letter word I wanted to use. Despite her attendance at more than a dozen special schools in the US and Britain, Rosemary struggled with reading and writing well into adulthood. But she was a fairly well-functioning girl. You know, she was very attractive, very social, and very jovial, and she attracted a lot of male attention. And seemingly the happiest period in Rosemary's life was spent in England in the years preceding the Second World War. After her father, Joseph, was appointed ambassador to the UK by President Roosevelt in 1938, the Kennedy family relocated there. And the beauty and charm of the teenage Rosemary and her younger sister Kathleen attracted the attention of the British press and did much to help the new ambassador walk right into the circle of British interests, as one newspaper at the time put it. I would guess that's the Daily Mail.
So she was completely fully functioning?
Yes, but she had problems with reading and writing. And, you know, she was a bit tetchy, irritable, I guess. She wasn't in her place, as it were.
Mm.
In May 1938, Rosemary and Kathleen were presented to King George VI and Queen Elizabeth at the Buckingham Palace.
At Buckingham Palace, I think is adequate.
Buckingham Palace. There's only one. And 19-year-old Rosemary was deemed to be exquisite. The newspapers plastered photographs of her all over the front pages. The Evening Standard swooned over, quote, Miss Rosemary Kennedy in her picture dress of white and tulle, embroidered with silver. Fuck me.
God, Andy.
Now, when Britain declared war on Germany in September 1939, Rose Kennedy and most of her children hurried back to the US.
Sorry, did England declare war on Germany, or did Germany declare war on England?
No, England declared war on Germany after the invasion of Poland, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they hurried back to the US, but Rosemary stayed behind with her father. When the Blitz began, she was sent out of London to Belmont House, which was a Montessori school. Do you remember those?
They still exist.
Okay. The Montessori method focuses on all 5 senses to help develop a child's learning.
Mm.
Did you go to one? I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised.
I went to a Catholic school and luckily escaped any form of problems.
Did you get severely thrashed by a man wearing a dress?
Funnily enough, I did actually.
So how did you afford? How do you figure you have avoided any form of abuse? If I was being hit with a bamboo cane by a man wearing a dress, I would pretty much call that abuse.
Oh dear.
By the time Rosemary arrived at Belmont, the press's fascination with Rosemary had taken its toll. Photographs at the time show her father grasping her arm tightly during the rounds of public appearances, which were often marred by her stumbling and making blunders of speech. The school offered a refuge from the glare of publicity, and Rosemary pronounced it the most wonderfulest place I've been to. After a few weeks there, Joseph enthusiastically wrote to his wife, she is contented completely to be teaching with Mother Isabel. She is happy, Mother Isabel, so we're talking convent school here as well.
Yes.
She is happy, looks better than she ever did in her life.
Well, a devout Catholic, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and is not the slightest bit lonesome, and she loves to get letters from her siblings telling her how lucky she is to be over here. Rosemary was thriving. One of her close school friends, Dorothy Gibbs, wrote to Rosemary's father, "Please God that someday he will grant you the joy of a perfect healing for her."
What?
Yeah, it's Catholic school, isn't it? They're praying for her being healed from her problems. But the problem with Joe during World War II was that he was a Nazi sympathiser.
What?
And yes. Oh, yeah. And coupled with his outspoken opinions that Britain could never win this war and that democracy was finished, it made his withdrawal as ambassador inevitable. In November 1940, with America on the brink of joining the conflict, he was sent back to the US with his political career in ruins. Rosemary accompanied him, and from this point, her life took a bit of a tragic downward turn.
How old was she?
She'd be about 22, 23 by this time.
Yeah.
Her return to America was disastrous. Taken away from the love and care that she'd been surrounded by in England, she regressed swiftly. The progress she made at Belmont House vanished. She reportedly had violent seizures and temper tantrums, lashing out at those around her, even her own younger siblings and the children in her charge. In one incident, reported by a chap called Peter Collier, the Kennedys, an American drama, a book, Rosemary suddenly attacked Honey Fitz, the family nickname of her maternal grandfather. That's a strange name for a grandfather, Honey Fitz. Weird family. No judgment here. Hitting and kicking her tiny white-haired grandfather until she was pulled away. Shut up in a convent, she grew defiant of restrictions. The nuns could not control her. And many nights, Rosemary's cousin, Anne Gargan, recounted, the school would call to say that she was missing, only to find her out walking around the streets at 2 a.m. It soon emerged that she was sneaking out, in the words of a fellow patient who shared many years of Rosemary's later confinement, to meet men in taverns, men who were happy to give her attention, comfort and sex. The convent sisters informed her father, who was horrified that not only was Rosemary at risk in his view, she was also jeopardising the high political ambitions he had for his sons. How dare she? Her erratic behaviour led Joseph to begin investigating surgical solutions. And in November 1941, he, without consulting his wife, authorised two surgeons, Dr. Walter Jackson Freeman and Dr. James Watts, who we'll come back to in our next bit, to perform a lobotomy on Rosemary. She was just 23 years old.
These people must have been...
He is a...
Joseph Kennedy, he aligned himself with Hitler because he was an anti-Semite.
And also he was
big. The Jews had thwarted his business.
Yeah, and he was big on the steel business as well.
Oh.
So it was a political and financial decision.
Yeah. So he sounds like a bit of a nasty fellow.
He is. He was.
A bit of. More than a bit of.
Yeah.
If you have your daughter lobotomized for no good reason.
The lobotomy was at the time a new psychosurgical operation. It involved separation or removal of pathways between lobes of the brain, and it was believed to be a cure for a multiple or a multitude of psychological delinquencies such as alcoholism, nymphomania, headaches, women's
Hysteria.
periods, of course, hysteria, and probably the vapors. Up to 5,000 lobotomies were performed in the US during the 1940s, the majority of them on women. In total, Dr. Freeman was single-handedly responsible for almost 3,000 of these procedures. An article in the Saturday Evening Post in May 1941 praised Freeman's pioneering work and offered hope that the surgery could make patients who were problems to their families and nuisances to themselves into useful members of society. So, drilling holes into Rosemary's skull, Dr. Freeman inserted a knife and began cutting away the frontal lobes of her brain. Strapped tightly to the table, this is your experts, right? Strapped tightly to the table, she was awake and terrified throughout the procedure. Suddenly, she fell silent and lapsed into unconsciousness. The operation had been a catastrophic failure. Rosemary could no longer walk or talk. Even after years of therapy, she could utter no more than a few words and never fully recovered the use of her limbs. Her autonomy, such as it had been, was effectively over. She was to live for the next 64 years, hidden away in institutions needing full-time care. Elizabeth Pentecoff records that doctors had ordered Rosemary to have no visitors because they could disrupt and confuse her. And it's possible that the father also directed there to be no visitors, aiming to avoid the charge by political rivals that there was lunacy in the family. Whatever the reasons, Rosemary received no visitors during the bleakest years of her life.
I wonder how long that went on for.
64 years.
No, but she kind of had no visitors for that length of time.
Well, in fact, when her mother, I think it took her mother 20 years or more to find out where her daughter was, because this was kept from the children and the wife. I'm telling you, this guy, without his wife's permission or a consultation, had her lobotomized, and then he shipped her off and hid her away.
And didn't tell the mother where her daughter was.
And it took her a long, long time to find out where she was, and she did start visiting her. But she was older then than she had been when she disappeared. The time lapse was a lifetime for her. So
is it unreasonable of me? You know how I was giving a brief history of Elon Musk's family and, you know, the dodgy parents and the super dodgy grandfather. You know, we've got this Kennedy.
Elon Musk should have been lobotomized.
Well, you know, is it unreasonable to use? I mean, you know, this fellow Joe sounds like an absolute bloody monster. He is a monster. There's no question. It doesn't sound like it. If it's true what you're describing, he is a monster. And who is the Kennedy that is now the health secretary in America? He is Joe's grandson.
I have no idea.
Has to be.
I don't know.
Because he's the one, well, I don't want to even mention it in front of your ears, but God knows how people are going to be at the end of his tenure as health minister.
Well, the health system in America is up the shit creek anyway.
Big time.
Well, the eldest Kennedy daughter, Rosemary, was eventually given a private cottage on the grounds of St. Coletta's, which is a special school in Wisconsin. And she lived there quietly, secluded from the press and prying eyes. In the 1960s, thankfully, a series of strokes left her father unable to move or talk.
Good.
And her mother suffered a stroke later in the 1980s, and they both needed constant care. The remaining siblings, Ted, Eunice, Jean, and Patricia, visited Rosemary in her later years. but for much of her life, her very existence was a secret. She lived forgotten by the world, with few companions except the devoted nuns who cared for her. She occasionally showed very tiny signs of progress, but those would vanish again. And for the last years of her life, she was huddled in a wheelchair, unrecognisable as a vibrant, beautiful woman who had dazzled the British press in the 1930s. She died in 2005 at the age of 86. So that was the tragic story of possibly the only decent Kennedy that there was.
Well, this fellow, I'm just trying to... He is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
So he would be a grandson.
So he would be a grandson.
He's JFK's son.
So is it reasonable...
Oh, sorry, Robert Kennedy's son.
Son, Bobby.
Bobby, yeah.
I mean, because he strikes me as an unpleasant person.
A chip off the old block, as it were.
Literally.
I mean, don't forget that in that mix of deaths attributed to the Kennedy family, you've got to throw Marilyn Monroe in there as well.
Yeah, but that wasn't... Do you think that was just a tragic accident?
No.
Or do you
she died as a direct result of meddling with the Kennedys.
Yeah.
Because she was having an affair with two of them at the same time. And the Secret Service didn't like that, Hoover didn't like that, and the Kennedys didn't like that.
What do you mean she wasn't shagging two of them at the same time?
She was shagging JFK Bobby. And Bobby.
This sounds a bit cosmic me on radiography.
It's something you can find out for yourself afterwards. But now I want to get on to the meat of the matter. The story of Rosemary Kennedy was just an example of a famous story of tragic failure, which it's not tragic. I mean, it was inevitable. Who the fuck thinks it's okay to poke around in someone's brain just because you've got the title of doctor and you don't know anything about the human brain? It's just annoying that people accept it.
But, you know, you've got these doctors were around in the 1920s
I don't
and 30s.
care. All the more reason to wait until someone tells them a little bit more about fucking medicine and biology before they start giving them big meat cleavers and opening people's heads up for them.
Yeah.
You do that to dead people to learn. You don't do it to live people to experiment. I think the Nazis proved that. So anyway, the history of lobotomy started at Yale. Be better, America. I don't want to bash America this whole episode, but this is pretty much America-centric, I'm afraid. And it was within the field of experimental neurology when up-and-coming physiologist John Farquhar Fulton...
Wasn't his name.
It was his name.
It wasn't his name.
It was his name. 1899 to 1960, he joined Yale's academic staff at the age of 30 in 1929, and he was actually the institution's youngest professor. Under his leadership, the Yale School of Medicine built up one of the world's most prominent research laboratories, the first in the United States to conduct research on primates. Fulton was so he's responsible for experimenting on monkeys as well, this wanker. Fulton was interested in the workings of various parts of the nervous system and gradually came to focus on the frontal lobes of the brain. The chimps, Lucy and Becky, were among the most famous primates to be studied. Both underwent a frontal lobotomy, which is removal of the frontal lobes, and this was shown to cause the loss of some functions, strangely enough. You don't need to be a fucking expert. And it affected their performance in tests where they had to rely on their short-term memory. However, what was to attract more attention were their observed behaviour changes. It seemed as if the apes no longer cared about earlier mistakes made, or they felt frustration when they failed the tests they were set. In settings where the apes had previously become frustrated and aggressive, they now seemed indifferent to making those mistakes. In Fulton's own words, it was as though they had joined a happiness cult. John Fulton presented his findings to the International Neurological Congress in London in 1935. One of the delegates attending the Congress was the Portuguese neurologist Antonio Citano de Abreu Freire Igas Moniz. We're just going to call him Antonio. And Moniz, or Antonio, was a highly versatile man. He'd been an ambassador to Spain during the World War I. He'd represented Portugal at the Versailles Peace Conference and had served as his country's foreign secretary. He'd also invented cerebral angiography and had twice been nominated for the Nobel Prize for his invention. It was, however, another discovery that was to bring him his biggest fame. Moniz returned home from the Congress in London convinced that it would be possible to transfer the knowledge from the ape experiments to a treatment for humans. Because he's an expert, you see. He quickly initiated a collaborative relationship with the neurosurgeon Almeida Lima, and over the next year, 20 patients were operated on. In the first series, alcohol was injected directly into the white matter of the frontal lobes as a sclerosing medication. Moniz then swiftly developed a so-called leucotomy, a long instrument with a steel strip for severing the connections to the frontal lobes. Moniz and Lima reported no deaths or serious complications in the first series. The second series of tests included 18 patients, all of whom suffered from schizophrenia. They reported that 3 of these 18 were almost cured and that 2 became much better. They concluded that the prefrontal lobotomy was a simple, fail-safe operation. Hang on, that's 5 out of 18. I want to know what happened to the other 13.
Yes, God dear.
They concluded that this was a simple fail-safe operation and that it was useful in the treatment of some mental disorders. Based on what I don't know. They also wrote that it was particularly effective against depression and melancholy. Yeah, because you've taken away the fucking thinking process of these poor people. They don't know they're depressed anymore. God, it makes me so angry reading this. It's just... Ugh. In 1949, Moniz was actually awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his discovery of the prefrontal leucotomy, which is now known as lobotomy.
He got a Nobel Prize for that, did he?
Yes. Well done, you expert. Fucking hell. The things we've done to ourselves in the name of science over the years is incredible. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize by the American neurologist who we mentioned earlier, Walter Jackson Freeman. And Freeman was one of the founders of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, and he was the real pioneer who made lobotomy a widely recognised psychiatric treatment, together with neurosurgeon, I hesitate to use these titles, James W. Watts, who we also mentioned, and they developed the Freeman-Watts standard prefrontal lobotomy method, and they authored the standard work Psychosurgery. Over a period of only 2 months, Freeman and Watts performed 20 lobotomies, and by 1942, and this is 6 years later, they had lobotomized more than 200 patients and published the results. And the results are, obviously not peer-reviewed. They reported that 63% of their patients had improved, while 24% saw no change and 14% became worse.
Vegetabilized.
It's not specified. One of the early patients treated by Freeman and Watts was, in fact, JFK's sister Rosemary. Now, the operation was not successful, as we know. Several patients suffered such serious complications, but Freeman nevertheless remained convinced that lobotomy was a major medical advancement. See, this is blinded by your own stupidity. It's being so narrow, tunnel-visioned that you are onto something that you just disregard anything that goes against what you believe in. It's fucking awful. However, he was less than pleased with the low number of patients that underwent surgery. Lobotomy required collaboration with a neurosurgeon and other personnel, and it was therefore only available at large university hospitals. Freeman's vision was to make lobotomy a far more prolific treatment. According to his own account, what we today associate with lobotomy is based on an idea that came to him while cutting ice for his drink with an ice pick. The technique became known as transorbital lobotomy, which is where the title of this show comes from. The objective was to sever the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus by using a thin surgical instrument, or an orbitoclast, to cut through the thin layer of bone above the eye socket. A small hammer.
Here.
No, the thin layer of bone in the corner of your eye.
Really?
I would think, or maybe it can't be here.
It's the corner of your eye. That's where people have lobotomies.
Okay, whatever. But this is the orbital bit that they're talking about.
Haven't you seen The Cuckoo's Nest? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yes. I saw that documentary. And it was more of a documentary than you might imagine. Yeah. And it's to cut through the thin layer of bone above the eye socket. A small hammer was then used to drive the instrument into the brain. According to Freeman, this operation could be performed without general anaesthetic, and no surgical expertise was required. Strictly speaking, it wasn't even necessary to use a qualified doctor. He personally performed the first of these transorbital lobotomies on a patient in 1946. Watts, however, was a bit sceptical of this method, and he ended their partnership in 1947. So there was one of them developed a conscience, at least. Now, with the introduction of the transorbital lobotomy came an upsurge in the uptake of this type of treatment. In 1949 alone, more than 5,000 lobotomies were performed in the United States. Freeman wore neither gloves nor a mask when performing the procedure, and was less than diligent when it came to sterilising his equipment. This was one of the reasons why Watts was critical of his procedures. Now, despite a mortality rate of 14%, Freeman performed 3,439 lobotomies in the course of his life, the last one in 1967. Lobotomy wasn't considered a cure.
14%?
14%. And
died.
That's mortality. That's not crippled for life. Lobotomy wasn't considered a cure for a particular disorder, but a means of reducing symptoms, like thinking. It was initially considered a last resort for patients who'd failed to respond to other treatments. And just like the diagnostic criteria could vary, the indications were not really very clearly defined. The first patients who were operated on, for example, were diagnosed with schizophrenia, but the procedure was at times performed as a last resort for disorders that were considered psychosomatic, like stomach ulcers or ulcerative colitis. Freeman appeared to be reporting particularly positive outcomes in patients who nowadays would have been diagnosed with OCD. But lobotomy was also considered a potential therapy in palliative care. So basically, you're on your way out, might as well take away the front bit of your brain and you'll be less hassle for the nurses and the doctors to deal with. Awful. Freeman was personally of the opinion that the treatment could stabilise the patient's personality and alleviate strong emotions. Of course. He saw psychosis as the result of excessive self-reflection. Thoughts that kept whirring backwards and forwards in the brain. He envisaged that this never-ending circle of painful thoughts could be stopped by literally severing the fibres. Many of the patients he operated on stopped feeling anxious and appeared more childlike. And it was later reported that many also became apathetic and passive, that they lost all initiative and their ability to concentrate or produce an emotional response. In the 40s and 50s, there started to be strong dissenting voices against lobotomy as a treatment in the United States and elsewhere. The criticism was strongest in the USSR, Soviet Union, where a complete ban on lobotomies was introduced in 1950 on the grounds that the treatment was inhumane. So well done, Russia.
So that was only, you were talking about 1947 and 48
yes.
when 5,000 were carried out. So they recognised the dangers of it only 3 years into the scheme.
Yeah. They'd probably been doing it on the down low for many years before that. No offence, Russia.
Well,
in the 1950s, psychiatry saw the introduction of neuroleptic drugs, and lobotomy was increasingly presented as an inhumane and oppressive treatment. As early as 1946, Robert Penn Warren published his Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, All the King's Men, where lobotomy is portrayed as a barbaric treatment. And it was. The Journal of the Norwegian Medical Association was also very critical of lobotomy and referred to the treatment in 1959 as an intervention that appeared to be random, indiscriminate, and lacking in any neurophysiological or any neuroanatomical insights. In the world of fiction, growing criticism of the therapy emerged as the 1950s and 60s progressed. In Suddenly Last Summer, playwright Tennessee Williams described a matriarch who wanted to have her niece lobotomized to prevent her from revealing that her son was gay. And when she's told that a lobotomy will not necessarily stop her niece from doing so, she answers, that may be, maybe not, but after the operation, who would believe her doctor? In the famous work One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, lobotomy is portrayed as a form of treatment that completely extinguishes a patient's personality and free will, and it's likely that these portrayals of lobotomy in fiction played an important part in changing views on the treatment in the media and among general population, and quite rightly. In the years after World War II, serious mental illnesses were rife, and there was a dearth of good treatment offers. Other parts of medicine had witnessed almost miraculous breakthroughs by then, like antibiotics, and in the beginning, lobotomy was described as a similar breakthrough, particularly in the Anglo-American and Scandinavian media. The proliferation of...
We were for it, were we, in Scandiland?
Yeah. The proliferation of this treatment largely appears to have been based on Freeman's charisma and his ability to enthuse the public and the news media. A comparative analysis of his publications also shows that Watts and Freeman both gave overwhelmingly positive reviews of the efficacy of the treatment, while grossly undercommunicating its adverse effects.
Did they ever get brought to justice?
Don't be ridiculous. You're allowed to do whatever you like as a doctor. The treatment was introduced in the 40s to 50s, despite the fact that basically no research had been carried out on its effects. Nevertheless, many of those who witnessed the first operations were convinced that lobotomy reduced suffering and that some patients saw an almost miraculous effect. Maybe 3, maybe 4. One of the problems in psychiatry was the lack of objective measures to gauge the efficacy of treatments, and lobotomy scored well on the measures that did exist. For example, the patient's IQ appeared to remain intact, and many patients needed fewer coercive measures and no longer acted out after treatment. Yeah, because they'd lost their will. This is why lobotomy, now seen as barbaric, was considered to be a humane breakthrough. Wherever you have faith in a treatment, there will always be a risk that conflicting interests cloud your judgment, whether consciously or unconsciously, particularly if the results are financially significant or associated with prestige. And this treatment was promoted by highly charismatic opinion leaders who had good access to the media. Freeman was highly idealistic and charismatic, and he had a strongly held belief in his treatment even after it fell into disrepute. Lobotomy has later been seen as one of the greatest mistakes in modern medicine. And
did they take his Nobel Prize away?
The awarding of the Nobel Prize to Moniz is described as a stain on the history of the prize. However, the story of lobotomy's journey from experimental to standard treatment has a lot in common with the way that other medical revolutions develop. At the time, the success criteria tended to focus on curbing aggressive behaviours and facilitating the transfer of patients from the asylums into the community. Whether a medical treatment is necessary or worth the risk will be a judgment call that is coloured by the historic context. It's easy to blame the practice of lobotomy on the poor judgment showed by the doctors in the past. It is, however, fairly important to remember that those who promoted the method were driven by idealism and a strongly held belief that their treatment alleviated suffering, which I don't particularly agree with. I think it all came down to ego and arrogance. One of the reasons why Freeman's reports of efficacy and adverse effects today comes across as highly anecdotal and unscientific is that the very notion of what constitutes valid scientific reporting has changed. Today's perception of lobotomy is an outlandish and barbaric treatment, and it's an indication that the world has changed dramatically since the 1950s. Thank God. As doctors and researchers, they're not only competent or incompetent, but also unlucky or lucky. Who will be remembered as the heroes and villains of medical innovation will depend on society's narrative about a treatment. Freeman remained convinced all his life about the positive effects of lobotomy, and he never gave up trying to convince the world around him about its usefulness. He just wanted to be remembered as the pioneer doctor. As the 60s progressed, he turned up at psychiatry conferences with shoeboxes full of Christmas cards sent to him by grateful lobotomized patients and their loved ones, and he emptied them out in front of skeptical colleagues. Well, that's a red flag behaviour for a start. But even then, no one was listening to him anymore. When
did he die?
Oh, I would have to scroll back a long way to find that out.
All right.
When all standard treatments have failed, doctors will always have to decide whether or not it's time to make one last-ditch attempt at trying a novel treatment, at the risk of being damned if they do and damned if they don't. What is considered effective treatment will be influenced by the times we live in and how the effect is evaluated. In 1941, Clarence Charles Burlingame, one of the leading psychiatrists at the time, held a famous talk in which he asked, "Do we use these treatments as empirically as our predecessors did their leeches and their bleedings? Are we, in the light of others who come after us, going to be accused of being users of stupid, bizarre or crude methods?" Well, the answer to that, my friend, is yes.
Yeah.
Will they think us no better than quacks? I've been saying it for years, mate. If we were to learn a lesson from history, or if doctors are to learn a lesson from history, it should be this. It's easy to blame the treatments of earlier times on poor judgment, but we are no less able to disengage ourselves from society and the framework conditions that guide our work today. We can never, the history of lobotomy should be a lesson in humility and shame, actually. We can never be entirely sure what will be remembered by future generations as breakthrough and what will be considered a big mistake. Well, I think putting an ice pick to the side of somebody's head and hitting it with a hammer could never be seen as anything except a huge fucking mistake. But that's just my view.
Unbelievably, Andy,
you agree with me.
You.
So, I mean, it was hard for me to actually do that episode because you know my feelings on our medical friends in general.
Yes, that's why I'm surprised that I actually agree with you in this case. But, I would like to say that it happened in the 1940s and 50s and modern science wouldn't have let it happen again.
Bear in mind, the last ones were being done up until the 1970s.
Well, not only that, but I don't want to go in, we've run out of time, but there was a classic, famous case of this Italian doctor operating in Sweden, replacing people's throats with plastic pipes.
Oh,
do you remember that?
And
that was literally 10 years ago. And these people had absolutely, I mean, they were pretty terminal anyway because they had throat cancer. But the way they ended up going was absolutely horrific to what could be described as a natural way of going. And he's still at large. He wasn't... I was castigated in public, but I don't know if he's still operating as a doctor in Italy or somewhere. But so even today, these absolutely terrible things do happen.
Yes, I know.
Unfortunately.
And it's a lottery whether or not you get a decent doctor or a complete and utter maniac with a license to hack.
Yeah, of course. But luckily, the difference today is that... there's so much transparency that you can get a second opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're that father who wants to silence your robust and energetic daughter because she's embarrassing the family...
No, absolutely. But that's why, I mean, you can't protect against monsters like that. Absolutely.
Oh, anyway, That does bring us to the end of this week's quite tough episode.
Yeah, that was heavy going.
It does fall within the remit of Strange Stuff podcast because of the way that a couple of maniacs fooled the world into destroying their families. It's just mental.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for listening. I know you didn't enjoy this episode, but I hope you found it interesting and enlightening.
Yeah.
And there is actually facts in it this week. So...
Yes, exactly. I'm not going to discover exactly. No. Yes, well done, Andy.
Don't forget, keep listening. Tell your friends. We'd like to reach more people. Follow us wherever you can. Check us out on our Facebook page. Check us out on YouTube. And just keep on trucking. We'll see you same time next week. Goodbye for now.
Yeah. Bye for now.